"Thanks, driver." That's what she said to me. After 4 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, after I emptied my bank account semester after semester just so she could chase a future that I knew would never include me. Mary looked straight at me, smiled politely, and handed me her gown bag like I was a stranger she had just hailed from the sidewalk. She didn't flinch, she didn't stutter, she had no idea. I held the door open for her as she stepped into the car, careful not to wrinkle her dress. Her mother got in beside her, clutching a bouquet of roses. "We did it, Mary," her mother whispered, wiping a tear. "All your hard work, you made it, baby." Mary nodded proudly, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "Yeah," she said softly, "I worked so hard for this." And I just sat there in the driver's seat, hands clenched on the steering wheel, choking on the weight of those words. Hard work? She didn't know what hard work looked like from my side of the screen, checking her tuition balance every month, calculating how much I'd need to tutor, to skip meals, to cancel trips home. She never once asked who was paying the sudden anonymous scholarships. She just called it luck. She thought fate had a crush on her. She thought the world just happened to owe her something. But it wasn't fate, it was me. I met Mary 4 years ago, during freshman orientation. She had lost her ID and was panicking outside the registration office. I offered to help, and when our hands touched over the shared printout, she smiled at me. That was the moment, that was all it took. From that day, I watched her quietly from the sidelines, never too close, never too obvious. She never noticed me again, but I noticed everything. When I overheard her crying in the library about tuition, I acted. I filled out the payment form and slipped cash into the account. She never saw my name. The school kept my donation, anonymous like I requested. She thought it was financial aid. I let her believe that, because I wasn't doing it for recognition. I did it because I believed in her. Every year, I watched her rise, her grades improved, her confidence grew, and she became someone everyone wanted to know. She started gaining followers, she became the face of self-made success. She even gave interviews, said she worked part-time to pay her fees, said she struggled for every credit, said she was proud to be proof that girls from humble backgrounds could still shine without help. I never corrected her. But today, on the day she crossed the stage in that custom-designed cap and gown I paid for, on the day she accepted that degree I helped fund, she turned to me, her voice dipped in soft indifference and said, "Thanks, driver." And it broke something in me. Not because she didn't know who I was, but because in that moment, I realized she never wanted to know. Mary wasn't blind, she was just selective. She saw luxury and assumed it came easy. She saw gifts and assumed the universe handed them to her because she deserved them. She saw effort, but only her own. The door clicked shut behind her, and I began to drive. The car was silent except for the sound of her mother's sniffles and Mary's nails tapping the screen of her phone. She was already posting her first graduation selfie. The caption would probably read something like, "Hustled, graduated, conquered." I stared at the road ahead, but my eyes burned. I didn't need credit. I never asked for her to fall in love with me. But was it really too much to hope that, at the end of it all, she would look back, just once, and see me standing there? Just once, she never did. And that's when I knew. It was time to stop driving people who only ever looked forward. My name is James. I'm not the kind of guy people notice in crowds. I'm the background, quiet, dependable, rarely heard, the kind of person professors remember for perfect attendance, and classmates forget existed the moment they graduate. I've always been comfortable there, just out of the spotlight, close enough to feel the warmth, never close enough to burn. I met Mary during the first week of freshman year. It was raining, not a soft drizzle, the kind that makes people dash indoors, tuck their heads, and mutter curses at the sky. I had just left the admin office after picking up my student ID and course schedule when I saw her under the broken awning, soaked, frustrated, clutching a torn file that was bleeding wet ink onto the sidewalk. She looked like chaos wrapped in curls, mascara running slightly, trying to hold it together while the world decided to test her. She had just transferred from another city and apparently lost her wallet and phone on the way to campus. I didn't know any of that at the time. I only knew that her lip trembled, her paper ID was smudged, and she was mumbling something to herself that sounded like, "Stupid rain." I stopped and offered her my umbrella. She blinked at me like I'd handed her a lifeboat. "Are you also a first year?" she asked, voice soft, a little hoarse. "Engineering," I said, holding out the handle. She smiled for the first time, tucked a wet strand of hair behind her ear, and took it. Her hand brushed mine, cold, damp, trembling. "Thanks, James," she said after reading the name on my ID card still clipped to my lanyard. That moment was nothing to her, but for me, it was everything. I didn't know it yet, but Mary had a way of doing that, leaving footprints on people's hearts without even noticing she stepped there. We didn't talk again for weeks. I saw her around campus, usually in the library, always focused, surrounded by text, books twice her size. She didn't wear makeup, she didn't have fancy clothes. But she had something that made people turn their heads, an earnestness, an energy, the kind that makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, life hadn't completely beaten her yet. She was majoring in mass communication, aiming to become a journalist. I found that out during a tutoring session I happened to overhear in the common hall. Her voice caught my attention from across the room. She was asking a tutor if they could extend the free session. "Just 10 more minutes," she begged. "I'll trade you my dinner credits." That night, I went home and did something reckless. I found her student account info through a tutoring connection and saw what I feared. Overdue tuition, unpaid library fines, 0 meal plan credit. That same night, I sent a bank transfer for the exact amount of her tuition, anonymous. No names, no emails, just a quiet deposit from a so-called donor program. I convinced myself it was a one-time thing. I'd seen someone drowning and tossed them a rope. That was it, no strings, no expectations. But I kept seeing her, and I couldn't look away. By her second semester, Mary was thriving. She had moved into a shared dorm, joined the university's media club, and started editing student interviews. I watched her videos late at night, not because I cared about what freshmen thought of the cafeteria food, but because I wanted to hear her voice, see her passion, feel like I was a part of her world even if only behind the glass. She didn't know it, but she changed me. I started taking better care of myself, started dressing neater, speaking more confidently. Every time I thought about slacking off or skipping a shift, I imagined her struggling through sleepless nights, refusing to give up, and I pushed myself harder. I paid her fees again that semester, and the next. Every time she logged into her portal expecting rejection, she saw 0 balances. "Guess they messed up again," she laughed one day to a classmate. "I keep getting these scholarship waivers and have no clue why." It wasn't a scholarship. It was me. I could have told her. Part of me wanted to, not to make her feel indebted, just to be seen, just to have her know that someone out there believed in her that much. But I also knew how it would make her feel. I didn't want to be the reason she changed how she walked through the world. I didn't want her kindness to become a performance just because someone was watching. I wanted her to be free. Still, I wasn't invisible. She knew who I was, barely. We shared a general elective once. She sat in the front, I sat near the back. Once, she forgot her pen. I passed one to her. She smiled. That smile stuck with me for a month. I kept that pen. In her second year, she started dating someone. Joseph, tall, loud, all swagger and no depth. He made sure everyone knew they were together. Instagram stories, hallway hugs, tagged posts with captions like, "My queen deserves the world." It stung, not because she chose someone else, but because he was a liar. I saw him with other girls, heard rumors about him partying too hard, flirting too much, but she never saw it. She believed every word he said. She let him hold her like she was precious, and still, I said nothing. She seemed happy. That was enough. At least, that's what I told myself. Then came the third year. She hit 10K followers on her Studygram account, got invited to host a podcast. Her professors adored her. She won an award for a documentary short on mental health in underfunded schools. During her acceptance speech, she said, "I got here with no help, just hard work." I remember staring at the screen with my mouth slightly open. Just hard work, that was all. No sleepless nights from the guy trying to tutor 3 students at once just to afford her meal plan. No skipped winter breaks because he stayed back to clear the semester dues. No James, no me. I felt foolish, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I watched her become the girl the world fell in love with. I stayed in the shadows, her invisible sponsor, her silent cheerleader, her emotional crash dummy every time she vented online about burnout and exams and needing a break. I read every post, I liked every video. I donated to her final year fundraiser under a fake name just so she could attend a journalism workshop abroad. And then came graduation. I saved up enough to rent her a car for the day, a shiny black sedan with leather seats. I had the driver cancel, I showed up instead, I wore a suit, I even got a haircut. Maybe she'd recognize me, maybe she'd say something, maybe I'd get a second look, but when I walked up, opened the door for her, and said good morning, she didn't blink. She handed me her bag and said, "Thanks, driver." That was the moment, not the heartbreak, not the betrayal. The realization that I had loved her so quietly, for so long, that she never even knew I was there. It wasn't the way Mary looked through me that shattered me, it was the way she smiled for Joseph 5 minutes later, like he was the sun and she was standing in its warmth. The same Joseph who once bragged to his friends at a bar, "She's cute but high maintenance, you gotta feed her ambition like a pet or she starts getting restless." I'd overheard that by accident in our second year, sitting one table away, buried in my books while they ordered shots and laughed. I told myself then that it wasn't my business, she'd figure it out, she had to. But here she was now, leaning into his shoulder for a selfie in her cap and gown, still blind. Or maybe she wasn't blind at all, maybe she simply saw what she wanted and ignored the rest, maybe I was just a line of blurred color in the background of her tightly focused shot. Joseph kissed her temple as they posed, cameras flashed, her followers screamed through the comment section. "Power couple goals! So proud of you both! Y'all did it together!" No, they didn't. He wasn't the one who quietly paid the second semester's overdue tuition while she sobbed in her dorm thinking she'd be expelled. He wasn't the one who found her part-time job when the dining hall wouldn't hire her. He wasn't the one who sat in front of a glowing laptop at 3 a.m., calculating which tutoring clients to take to cover her upcoming conference fee. He wasn't the one who bled for her behind closed doors. I was. And now, Joseph was the one holding her hand as if he had carried her here, as if she hadn't walked this path with invisible hands beneath her feet the whole way. They turned toward me. She gestured at the car. "Let's go eat, babe, I'm starving." Joseph nodded and tossed me a look like I wasn't even human. "Yo, driver, Central Park Restaurant, and don't take the long route, alright?" I didn't speak, I opened the door. They climbed in laugh. And the drive was quiet for the most part. I watched them through the rearview mirror, watched him kiss her fingers and lean in to whisper things that made her giggle. Her mother had taken a separate cab home. The silence was broken only once when Mary casually said, "I'm just so lucky things worked out." Joseph chuckled. "Luck? Come on, babe. You worked for this. No one handed you anything." Mary nodded proudly. "Yeah. All me." I bit down on my cheek so hard, I tasted blood. It was when we reached the restaurant and she stepped out, barely looking at me, that the weight in my chest finally shifted. She didn't just forget me, she erased me. And that was when I knew what betrayal really felt like. It's not always cheating, it's not always a knife to the back. Sometimes, betrayal is silence. Sometimes, it's being written out of a story you built together. I was never in her narrative. To her, I wasn't a secret guardian or a hidden protector, I wasn't anything at all, just a stranger in a rented suit holding open the door to her dream life. I drove off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my room staring at the ceiling, counting the times I'd said no to things I wanted, because I was saying yes to her behind the scenes. A new laptop for myself? No. Mary needed a new mic for her podcast. A trip home for Eid? No. Mary's lab fees were overdue. Shoes, groceries, new clothes, all replaced by textbook receipts, registration slips, meal plans. All for a girl who now called me driver and smiled for someone else. It wasn't that I wanted her love in return, but I had hoped, deep down, that she'd see me. Even just once. That night, I logged into the donation portal under my alias and clicked delete account. No more hidden payments, no more silent sponsorships, no more Jame in the background. Let her stand on her own now, let Joseph lift her up if he can. Let her remember me when it matters, or not at all. I didn't care anymore, that's what I told myself. The next morning, I bumped into Jasmine. She was Mary's roommate, quiet, observant, the kind of girl who always spoke less than she knew. "Hey," she said, blocking my path outside the campus gates. "You okay?" I shrugged. "Fine." She stared at me for a long time, then pulled out her phone, tapped twice, showed me a screenshot. It was from Mary's blog. A draft post she hadn't published yet. The title, Things I'll Never Say Out Loud. The first line stopped my breath. I know someone has been paying for me. I read the rest. I don't know who, but I think I know. There's only one person who always disappears whenever I need something the most. He never asks for thanks, never waits for applause. I don't know if it's really him, but if it is, I hope he knows I'm great for you. Lol. I handed the phone back, my fingers were shaking. Why didn't she post this? I asked. Jasmine sighed. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she thought it would ruin the story she built, the one where she made it all by herself. Or maybe she didn't mean it, I muttered. Jasmine didn't answer. She just looked at me for a moment longer and said, She's not heartless, James, just blind. I nodded once and walked away. Later that night, Joseph uploaded a video. Graduation vibes with my queen, it said. In the vlog, Mary beamed. She hugged him, kissed him on the cheek, showed off her gown. But something was off in her smile. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe she was thinking about the post she didn't publish. Or maybe she wasn't thinking about me at all. Still, I clicked like. One last time. I started waking up with a pit in my stomach, not just once in a while, every day, as if my body knew before I did that I wasn't part of her world anymore, that I never truly was. The worst part wasn't that Mary didn't love me, it was realizing she never had to. She didn't need to try, she didn't need to earn me. I made sure she never saw the cost of her dreams because I paid it in silence, and in doing so, I taught her that things just showed up when she needed them, that tuition would be magically handled, that opportunities would arrive just in time, that rides would wait, and doors would always open. I let her build her empire on my invisible scaffolding, and now I was the one collapsing beneath it. I stopped eating properly. Every bite tasted like metal. I'd open the fridge, stare at nothing, then close it again. My apartment, once a quiet place of planning, spreadsheets and reminders, turned into a dim blur of unwashed clothes and untouched dishes. I started ignoring people. Even Jasmine's texts. Because how was I supposed to explain to someone that I was mourning a relationship that never existed? I wasn't her boyfriend, I wasn't her friend, hell, I wasn't even an acquaintance by the time she graduated. And yet, every room I entered felt emptier without her. I'd grown so used to checking her page every morning that even when I told myself I'd stopped, my fingers would hover over the screen like muscle memory. Sometimes I'd slip, I'd see her new posts, smiling beside Joseph, holding coffee with gold rings on her fingers, posing next to her podcast mic like she built herself from the ground up. And the comments. God, the comments. Self-made queen. Mary proves hard work pays off. Manifestation goals. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply to every post and say, no, she didn't do it alone. She never paid for that mic. She never bought that laptop. The reason she didn't starve during exam weeks wasn't grit. It was me, slipping meal credits into her account when the balance hit zero. But what would it change? Nothing. If I exposed her, I'd be bitter. A jealous loser trying to rob her of her success. If I stayed silent, I'd keep bleeding behind the curtain while she took bows on stage. There was no win, just me, and my hurt, and my silence. One night, I was tutoring a student, a bright sophomore named Naveed, who struggled with calculus. He looked up mid-session and asked, "You okay, bhai? You seem off lately." I gave him some excuse, that I was just tired, that finals were catching up. But the truth was, I was disappearing, bit by bit. I couldn't focus, I couldn't sleep, I'd wake up sweating from dreams where she finally looked at me, not with pity, not with confusion, but with realization. In the dream, she'd whisper, "It was you." And I'd finally feel whole. But I'd wake up before she finished the sentence, every time. What haunted me wasn't that she moved on, it was that I had no place to miss her from. No one knew what I'd done, there were no memories to point at and say, this is where we were happy. I had nothing but receipts, and the ache. Even Joseph, for all his arrogance, had memories with her, photos, dinners, laughs, public acknowledgements. All I had was the silence behind her success, and it kept getting louder. I started counting days since graduation, days since I deleted my donor account, days since I drove her to that restaurant and she stepped out without looking back. 1, then 5, then 12. The longer the silence stretched, the more I wondered, would she ever know, would she ever feel it, that sudden absence of invisible hands holding her world together? Or had I trained her too well? She posted a quote once, "The right people support you without needing attention." I read it 5 times. It broke me. Because yes, I supported her, and no, I never asked for attention, but the idea that my absence would be romanticized as some noble act, that I would be seen as the quiet savior in her private mythology, if ever seen at all, felt worse than being forgotten. Because I didn't want to be her silent hero anymore. I wanted to stop bleeding for people who called it rain. One evening, Jasmine messaged me again. "You still think she doesn't know?" I stared at that message for a long time, and then I replied. "It doesn't matter if she knows, she never asked." Because love isn't just about gratitude, it's about intention, and hers was never to find me. She never once asked, "Who's behind this?" She just let it happen, like luck, like fate, like magic. And magic, once broken, never looks the same again. The sun that morning was too bright, the kind of sharp brightness that didn't warm you, it exposed you. I wore a charcoal suit, ironed to perfection, my tie straight, my shoes polished. It was Mary's graduation day, and despite everything, I showed up. Not because I hoped for anything, not even recognition, but because I needed to witness the ending with my own eyes. I had rented the car, not a cheap one, a sleek black sedan, tinted windows, leather interior, GPS already set for the ceremony venue. I told myself it was the last gesture, a final bow to a story no one knew I was part of. When I pulled up in front of her apartment, Mary walked out in her pale lavender gown, her hair curled softly around her shoulders. Her mother followed behind her, adjusting her cap. They were glowing, radiant. She looked at me, confused for a moment, then something clicked in her expression, not recognition, just polite detachment. "Thanks, driver," she said, and handed me her handbag like I was part of the service. The word pierced sharper than any insult could have. Driver, not James, not a friend, not someone who bled in silence for her for 4 years, just a utility. She slid into the back seat, chatting with her mother about how perfect the weather was, how she hoped the pictures turned out well. I said nothing. I drove. Outside the university auditorium, cameras clicked like firecrackers. The stage was already set with banners, bouquets, and streaming crews. Students milled about, hugging, crying, laughing, 1,000 little stories peaking at once. Mary stepped out of the car with the elegance of someone used to being adored. Her heels clicked confidently against the stone tiles. Her mother kissed her cheek. Joseph stood waiting near the gates. Of course he was here. Wearing a suit 2 sizes too flashy, holding a bouquet of roses that looked like they were ordered just for show. The moment she saw him, her eyes lit up in a way that used to only exist in my imagination. She ran to him, hugged him. The camera shutters chased them. I watched from the side, blending into the other drivers and background staff. The ceremony started. Her name was called. She ascended the stairs, accepted the scroll, and threw her cap with a bright smile. The crowd cheered. I didn't clap. My hands stayed in my pockets, but my heart, it clapped quietly, one last time, for the girl I once believed in. Then came the twist. At the celebration lunch later that afternoon, after the guests had filled their plates, after the wine had been poured, Joseph stood up with a smug smile and clinked his fork against the glass. "Everyone, if I could have a moment," he said, his voice dripping with staged confidence. "I just want to say how proud I am of Mary. She's not only the most beautiful woman here today, she's also the most hard-working." The table chuckled, Mary blushed. "And," Joseph added, pulling a piece of folded paper from his coat pocket, "since she's too humble to say it herself, I'd like to share a little something I found in her drawer last night." Mary's smile faded slightly. Joseph unfolded the paper and cleared his throat. "It's titled, 'Things I'll Never Say Out Loud.'" I froze. I knew that title. Jasmine had shown it to me once, an unpublished blog post that Mary had written and buried in a folder, the one where she hinted that someone had helped her all along, someone who had never stepped forward, someone she had quietly suspected. Was me. My pulse thundered. I wanted to get up, but I couldn't move, my limbs locked. Joseph read, I don't know who he is, maybe I do, maybe it's the guy who always sat in the back row but disappeared whenever I turned to thank him. Maybe it's the same boy who offered me his umbrella the day I transferred. I used to think fate was sending me little miracles. But maybe it was a person, not luck. If he ever reads this, I'm sorry. And thank you. You carried me without asking for anything in return. I owe you more than I can ever say. The room went quiet. Mary's expression twisted. Not in embarrassment, but in shock. She hadn't given Joseph permission to read that, and she hadn't expected the audience to react this way. Her mother looked around in confusion. "What is that, Mary?" she whispered. Joseph, trying to save face, added quickly, "It's sweet, right? She's just really grateful, that's the kind of girl she is, heart of gold." But no one laughed. The energy had shifted. And Mary, she stood up from her chair and walked straight out the back exit. I followed. I don't know why, I just did. Outside, she was leaning against the wall, her hands shaking. I stood a few feet away. She saw me, finally. Her eyes searched mine, and then she said it. "Was it you?" I didn't answer. She repeated, softer this time. "James, it was you, wasn't it?" I wanted to lie, I wanted to shrug and walk away. But she already knew. Her lips trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was never about me," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "It was about you, and I didn't want you to feel indebted, I just wanted to help." "But I..." Her voice cracked. "I treated you like a stranger, I called you a driver." "You were never supposed to see me," I said. "I was just supposed to lift you." She covered her mouth with her hand. "I don't know how to fix this." I smiled. "That's the thing, Mary, you don't have to. It's already broken." Then I turned and walked away, leaving her in the silence she had created. The thing about truth is, it doesn't shout when it arrives, it whispers, quietly, persistently, until it's the only voice left in the room. I didn't go home that night. I walked for hours, past the graduation banners still fluttering from lampposts, past couples celebrating in restaurants, past familiar corners that felt different now, emptied, somehow. I didn't feel triumphant for finally being seen. I felt hollow, because her realizing the truth wasn't satisfying. It was too late, and too late always tastes like regret. The next morning, my phone vibrated. It was Jasmine. I ignored the first message, then the second. On the third, I finally answered. She didn't say hello, she just said, she didn't sleep all night. I said nothing. "She's been sitting in our living room since dawn," Jasmine continued. "She hasn't spoken to anyone." I offered her coffee and she just looked at me like she didn't know what a cup was. Still, I didn't respond. She told me, Jasmine finally said, that all this time she was looking at the wrong person, that she was busy building herself up for the world, but never once thought to turn around and see who was holding the ladder. That sentence cracked something in me, not because it was an apology, but because it was finally the truth. Then Jasmine said something that flipped the world upside down. She said she wants to repay you, properly, not just with words. I scoffed. "There's no debt to repay." "She doesn't see it as debt," Jasmine said softly. "She sees it as loss, and that's worse." I hung up. I spent the day trying to distract myself, rewrote my resume, checked my pending applications, read the same 3 sentences in a book I didn't care about. But by sunset, I was back at campus. I told myself I was there to return some old reference books. But my feet took me to the communication department building. And there she was, on the top step, alone, looking out over the empty lawn where students had celebrated just hours ago. "Mary." She turned when she heard my footsteps. Her eyes were red, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came." "I didn't plan to." "But you did," she said. We stood in silence, a long, weighty silence that somehow said more than either of us could. "I read the full post," I finally said, "the one Joseph exposed." She winced. "I never meant for that to be public. He found it without asking. He thought it'd be a cute tribute. He didn't know that I was the person?" She nodded. "I think part of me always knew. But I didn't let myself believe it, because if I did..." Her voice broke. I would have had to face everything I ignored. Everything I took for granted. I stepped closer, but not too close. She needed space to say it, to own it. I was selfish, James, she whispered. I was so caught up in becoming someone important, I didn't realize I already mattered to someone. Quietly, constantly. You didn't owe me anything, I said. But I gave you nothing, she countered, not even kindness, not even the decency of a thank you. I handed you my bag like you were beneath me, and the worst part is, I believed my own myth, that I made it alone. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. I was wrong, she said. I was so wrong. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I wasn't looking through rose-colored memory. I saw her clearly, flawed, human, late, but sincere. It hurt, I admitted. Not because you didn't love me. I never expected that. But because you never looked back. Not once. You stood on a mountain I built and told the world you climbed it alone. She pressed her hand to her chest, like the weight of my words had hit her physically. I don't know how to make this right. You can't, I said. This isn't a movie. There's no grand fix, no perfect gesture too. Hat heals 4 years of being invisible. Her lips quivered. Then what now? I hesitated, and then Jasmine appeared. She was standing at the base of the steps, holding something. Mary turned, surprised. Jasmine? Jasmine nodded once. You left this, she said, walking up and handing Mary a sealed envelope. Mary looked confused. She opened it and pulled out a photo. My ID photo, from 4 years ago, the first day we met, rain-streaked, blurry, and folded at the corners. I found it in her journal, Jasmine told me, her eyes meeting mine. She kept it, all this time. Mary held it like it was a fragile piece of memory. The day you gave me your umbrella, I told myself I'd never forget your name, but I did. I looked away. No, she said, stepping toward me, holding the photo. I didn't forget. I just buried it. Buried you. Because I didn't want to believe that someone would help me without asking for anything in return. And now? She looked up, eyes burning with the fire I remembered from the library that night. Now I know what love looks like when it's quiet. Now I know what I lost. I didn't speak. I know you probably don't want anything from me, she added, but I want to say it anyway. She stepped closer. Thank you, James. Her voice cracked. Thank you for everything. And that was the moment, not the tears, not the confession. The moment of confrontation was when I looked into her eyes and felt absolutely nothing I used to feel. No longing, no ache, no what-ifs, just peace. I smiled. You're welcome, I said gently. And goodbye, Mary. I turned around and walked down the steps, not because I was angry, but because I was finally free. Free from waiting, from hoping, from building futures for people who never thought to include me. Behind me, Mary stood in silence, clutching the photo of a boy who once loved her from the shadows. But I was no longer him. I didn't cry that night. I didn't sit in the dark nursing heartbreak or scroll through old photos of a girl who had already chosen someone else. I just went home. And for the first time in years, I actually slept. No dreams, no racing thoughts, no Mary, just stillness. The kind of peace that doesn't come from fixing things, the kind that comes from finally letting go. The next morning, I woke up with a strange kind of clarity. I opened my laptop and stared at the list of job offers I had ignored for weeks. Decent positions, sure, but nothing special. The one I had wanted all along, the company Mary once dreamed of joining, Golden Atlas Media, was silent. But there was another email in my inbox, from a recruiter. Anna Tech Communications. I'd never heard of it. At least, not until I checked the sender's signature and realized who the CEO was. Jasmine. Turns out, she wasn't just Mary's quiet roommate, she was heir to a mid-sized tech firm that had recently started pivoting into media acquisitions, and apparently, she'd been watching all along, not just as a bystander to Mary's story, but as a quiet witness to mine. Her message was short. If you're ready to stop building empires for others, come build one for yourself, with me. There was an attachment, a job offer, 6 figures, full benefits, equity, and the title, Chief Creative Director. I didn't hesitate. I accepted. The first few weeks were intense, long hours, constant pitches, team restructuring, but for the first time, I was the architect, not the scaffolding, and I thrived. One day, as I walked past the conference room, I heard my name, laughter followed, then Jasmine's voice, cool, composed, sharp as ever. He doesn't just create campaigns, he creates silence that speaks louder than noise. I smiled and kept walking. Eventually, the company started gaining attention. Media outlets began covering our growth. Interviews, IWs, panels, awards. And that's when it happened. My story started trending. Not the love story, the real story. The one I had never told anyone, but someone else did. An anonymous blog post went viral. The invisible sponsor, how one man funded a stranger's dreams and built his own instead. The post was eloquent, heart-wrenching, brutal. It never named Mary, but it didn't need to. Screenshots, forum debates, graduation photos, old receipts, digital trails, all of it painted the full picture. It exploded. Hashtags trended for days, people called it the quietest heartbreak on campus, the comments flooded in. He's the definition of selflessness. Imagine finding out the person who funded your whole life was the one you dismissed. I hope she sees this. She did, because 2 days later, she showed up. Uninvited. Mary walked into the office dressed in soft beige, her hair tied back, trying to look like humility, but her eyes, they still carried the arrogance of someone who thought the world should forgive her the moment she said sorry. She waited in the lobby, Jasmine informed me, but didn't interfere. I stepped out. We didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then she finally broke the silence. I didn't know it would go viral. I did, I said. Eventually, truth always does. I didn't come here to ask for anything, she said quickly. I just wanted to say I saw everything. Read every word, and I'm not here to clear my name. No, I said, tilting my head. You're here because the world finally saw what you refused to. Her jaw tightened. You're angry. No. I'm successful, I replied. There's a difference. She lowered her gaze. I deserve everything they're saying, don't I? You deserve exactly what you gave, I said. Silence, absence, and a future that doesn't include me. She looked up then, wounded. You really don't love me anymore? I stepped closer. Close enough to whisper. I loved you when it cost me everything and got me nothing. That kind of love doesn't survive truth. She didn't say a word, and I didn't offer any comfort. Before she turned to leave, I added, "Oh, and Mary?" She stopped. Jasmine's not just my boss, she's my partner, in business, and otherwise. Mary froze. That was the final cut, the one she never saw coming. I watched her walk out, slow, stiff, like someone finally learning what consequences feel like. And I let her go, for real this time. Weeks passed. Anatech expanded into 3 more cities. We closed 2 major deals. Jasmine and I moved in together. Sometimes, I'd still get tagged in threads about the quiet sponsor. Sometimes, Mary's followers tried to defend her. Other times, people dissected the signs. But I never commented, not once, because I didn't need to. She lost me when I was invisible, and I found myself when I stopped trying to be seen. Months later, I received one last message, from an anonymous account. It read, "If I could go back, I'd look for you, first." I didn't reply. I simply deleted it. That night, Jasmine sat beside me on the balcony, wine in her hand, starlight in her hair. You ever think about her? She asked. I looked at her, honest, present, real. No, I said. I only think forward now. She smiled. And I meant it. Because some stories don't end with revenge. They end with replacement. Not just of people, but of purpose. I didn't get closure from Mary. I got it from becoming someone who didn't need her to see me. I became someone worth seeing on my own.